No previous pandemic kind of completely derailed the human course. Not even the Black Death was far, far bigger and more horrendous than COVID. Again, think about it. A third of the population, it's estimated that at least in England, in the Kingdom of England, about a third of the population died within a few years. In our terms, it's really unimaginable what it means. And, the strange thing about when you look at England with the Black Death is that it caused far less changes than you would have expected. For instance, there is no major political change. It's the same king, it's the same monarchy, it's the same feudal system, it's the same church. Part of the reason is people didn't even think that it's the responsibility of the king to do anything. So with this huge disaster, there is no major political changes. I think also now you see that ultimately it's not about the virus. Ultimately, it's about the humans. It's about the decisions they make. And unfortunately, I would have expected, kind of hopefully, that when confronted by the virus, this would cause humanity to unite. People often say that in order to unite, you need an external enemy. And what better external enemy than a virus? Because for the virus, there is no difference between British people and French people, between Russians and Ukrainians, between Israelis and Palestinians. We are all prey. We are all food for the virus in a way. So this should have driven us together, especially because it's so obvious that as long as a pandemic continues to spread in one country, no country can feel safe because it might reach us, or there might be a new mutation. And even if we are vaccinated, the new mutation might evade our defenses. But it didn't happen. During the height of the pandemic, you did not see the kind of political solidarity that we could hope for. And, the pandemic is not even over, and we see this wave of violence sweeping over the world. The Russian invasion of Ukraine basically kind of breaking the biggest taboo of the international system since 1945. Since 1945, the most basic rule of the international system was you can't destroy countries by force. You can't just because you're strong invade another country and wipe it off the map. And this taboo is now being broken by Putin. We see rising tensions in East Asia around Taiwan. We are now, I think, for the first time in many years, in a situation where a new world war is possible. It's not inevitable, it's not deterministic, but it is suddenly again on the table. And immediately after a pandemic, which should have drove us in the opposite direction. So, as a historian, I often say that we should never underestimate human stupidity. It's one of the most powerful forces in history. Again, you think it's very obvious what we should be dealing with, and you find that at least some people are making completely opposite decisions. And, part of the problem with war, and I also touch on it in the book, in Unstoppable Us, because I raised the question of where did war originate?
Right.
And you go back to the Stone Age, and the thing is, we don't have any evidence for war between groups. We have evidence for small-scale violence, like one person hitting another person. But for war between groups, the first evidence we have is from 13,000 years ago, which is nothing in evolutionary terms. So all these arguments that war is part of human evolution or it's in our DNA, we have no evidence for that. Apparently, war is just a human invention. Some human cultures invented this thing of war. And the problem with war is that it's one-sided. To make peace, you need a lot of people to agree. To make war, one person is enough. One side is enough. If they decide to have war, you can't just say, but we don't agree. Nobody's asking you. So it seems that the history of war is a history of, it's a human invention. It's not a natural phenomenon, which then spread. Because even if you have a region with 50 tribes who are peaceful and one tribe which is warlike, that's enough. The war will spread.
This morning, you've talked to me about Putin and Orban. Mm-hmm. You've talked to me in explicitly political terms.
Yeah.
And I think one of the criticisms sometimes leveled at Sapiens was that it was a big history book that was abstemious. It abstained on political questions. And I wonder whether your position on those political questions and your writing has changed since Sapiens has come out because of the widespread rise of populism. Mm-hmm. Or is your job as a historian of big history to abstain? It seems to me you're much more explicitly political these days.
I mean, part of it is because the political temperature around the world is reaching the boiling point. And, you know, the ability to just sit on the fence, it's becoming more and more difficult. There is no fence. There is kind of a razor-sharp knife. It's very difficult to sit on it.
Yes. Uncomfortable, yes.
But also I think that ultimately, I'm not a politician. I'm not an expert on the current international relations or military strategy. I try not to comment kind of in a too detailed way because I just don't have the expertise. But ultimately, history is about these things. I don't think that history is the study of the past. I think history is the study of change, of how things change. The present and the future are also part of history. And, you know, ultimately, this is what makes history relevant. I mean, who cares about all these kings and dates and battles and things that happened thousands of years ago to dead people? The people in the past are all dead. They don't care what we think about them. But they are important because they still shape the world in which we live right now. We are basically living inside the dreams of dead people. You know, people hundreds of years ago, sometimes thousands of years ago, invented all kinds of stories, mythologies, dreams, and people today still believe very strongly in these stories, and this is what shapes the world. So, writing the history of how these stories were invented and spread, I think of it as a profoundly political enterprise.
But what about the story that you're telling? That this is a line in all of your work, that the power of the stories that humans tell themselves about themselves. But are the new stories that are being told by thinkers like you, mm-hmm. are they any better than the old ones? I
hope so. I mean, a key thing is not everything is a story. Not everything is. There is truth. There are facts. I try to base my writing on scientific facts. And, you know, a very central question to ask, when you hear the story of something, you should ask about the hero or the heroes of the story. If you want to know whether the heroes are real or fictional, you should ask, can they suffer? It's a very, very important question. Can they suffer? Now, money can't suffer. Corporations can't suffer. You know, when, I don't know, Facebook loses a lot of money, it doesn't suffer because it's just a story in people's minds. Nations don't suffer. When a nation, I don't know, loses a war, Germany loses the First World War, Germany doesn't suffer. There is no mind of Germany. There is no nervous system of Germany that Germany can feel pain. Humans suffer. Also animals suffer. So the heroes of the stories that I try to tell, first of all, are real entities, biological entities. Again, they are human beings, they are animals. Even if we talk about groups, then, you know, nations are ultimately shaped by imaginary stories in the minds of people. Species are a different thing. Species are an objective biological reality. Chimpanzees and gorillas are different from each other, not because they believe in some chimpanzee mythology and the gorillas believe in a gorilla mythology, but there is an objective scientific difference between them. This is not the case with, say, Germans and French, or with Israelis and Palestinians. The difference between them isn't biological at all. It's in the stories that they believe and that they tell each other. So for me, it's very, very important. I see history as standing on the shoulders of biology. The most important thing to understand about history, first of all, is that humans are animals, that history is built on biology. It's not just biology, because we are very special animals. We can do things that other animals can't. But the foundation is biology.